This is No Hate Radio.
I'm no stranger to the rain. Oh, no. I'm no stranger to the rain.
We are actually recording this episode on September 17th, 2024, to be on the air on October 5th, 2024. The reason I'm being so specific about dates is that these broadcasts that we have done in the last 2 or 3 sessions were intended to be and have been focused on the election, federal election and state elections for the year 2024. The actual election day, I believe, is November 5th, 2024. But what we need to understand, those of us who are thinking about how important this election is, those of us who have ideas about the direction of this country and where we need to go and what we need to keep and what we need to not retain, we need to understand that elections are no longer a matter of an election day. They are a matter of an election cycle. And our producer just looked through a bunch of states, finding that some states are sending out mail ballots for this election as early as 60 days ahead of the election, which means they're in the hands of voters right now on this day as we talk. The other states, many of them are sending out mail ballots within a reasonably short period of time. I bring up all those points, which may sound like rather technical or mundane points, to raise the issue of voting in the presidential election and many of the state elections, particularly those who will select U.S. senators, which is virtually equally important almost as the presidential race because of the way that the government functions. And all of those things are upon us at this point. And I hear from time to time, and believe me, I receive a massive amount of email, text, and correspondence of various kinds, whether it's printed, whether it's electronic, or whatever, every method you can communicate with people. I receive a massive amount of correspondence from campaigns on both sides of the aisle. And I also see it on television like everyone else, and I hear it on radio. It's very difficult for me to understand at this point now how anyone can remain undecided in the elections of 2024. And you might say, well, why would you say that? Very often people make up their minds in elections at a very near the actual casting of their ballots. And in the past, one could see that. One could see how that could happen. You could have 2 candidates, both of which have respective merits, and maybe their view for the direction of the country is somewhat different, or their priorities are different, but you don't see the kind of stark, massive differential in the vision for America that you see in the election of 2024. And I note that in recent times, members of the press have gone around conducting their one-on-one interviews in various parts of the country, and that what is panning out, which is, I believe, perceived by the media as being a little bit unusual, is that they are not hearing that people are undecided in this race, but that they will be going either one way or the other, depending on whatever their priority views are. So what I'd like to do is complete our discussion of Project 2025. By our discussion, I mean that on No Hate Radio, because certainly major media outlets networks even, other podcasts, other broadcasts, have gone into great detail discussing and reviewing and dissecting this massive document known as Project 2025. And while we've spent some on it, we started off on the Supreme Court. We talked about the ideas projected in Project 2025 for the labor and employee relations and for other segments of it. The general idea that I'd like to talk about for a little while today before I get into more of the concepts of what should a voter do and how does a voter need to analyze what's going on in this world. I'd like to take a shot at Project 2025 from I'll use an aviation analogy. I'd like to do the view from 5,000 feet. And by that I mean, if Project 2025 is to be fully implemented, if it's to be made the mantra, made the direction, if it's to prevail, much as it did, much as the 1984 version of the American Heritage Foundation's Vision for America became the Reagan administration's roadmap, right down to trickle-down economics and many of the other things that were done. If we were to see a 2025 version of that, what would America look like? Now, I want to go to the title. We call it Project 2025. The authors say it's a mandate for leadership. It's the conservative promise. I think when we consider the overview, the view from 5,000 feet about Project 2025, we need to remember who this conservative promise is being made by. Most of the organizations that constitute the Project 2025 Advisory Board have names that literally wrap themselves in the American flag and patriotism and what's just and right and true. And you have to do some research to determine exactly what these organizations that came together to develop the Project 2025 Advisory Board really believe. And one of the ways you can do that is you can go to their individual websites. Recommend a review if you're interested in going deeply into Project 2025 and reading the actual document itself, 922 pages of material, maybe more than you have time or stamina for. Choose something. One website is one from an organization on the Project 2025 Advisory Board called the American Conservative. Another one, the American Accountability Foundation. The American Principles Project, the Center for Family and Human Rights, the Center for Immigration Studies, the Coalition for a Prosperous America, the Foundation for Government Accountability, and of course the one that strikes me as the kind of the pinnacle of using the patriotic names to advance a particular agenda is one called Freedom Works. At the apex of all these organizations is the Heritage Foundation. And I recommend that if you want to learn where these ideas come from, look at the website of the Heritage Foundation. Remembering that that was the organization when it was a new fledgling organization that created a document in 1984 that became the Reagan administration's roadmap. And one of the things we need to do is I just can't resist the notion of adding a few more of the advisory board organizations just because of what I consider to be the using of words and titles, and I'll let you be the judge of that, to mask the true intentions of some of these organizations. The James Madison Institute, Liberty University, the National Association of Scholars, the Patrick Henry College, Recovery for America Now Foundation, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I won't go down any more of those lists. The point is, when you have an organization or when you have a document that purports to be the roadmap by which 330 million Americans should pattern their lives, we need to know who wrote the book. And in this case, there's an individual named Jonathan Berry who lists among his resume, he assisted with the development of regulatory policy and with the nominations of Justice Neil Gorsuch and dozens of other judges. He previously served as chief counsel for the Trump transition and earlier clerked for Associate Justice Samuel Alito. As you go through the names of some of these people, it's easy to determine what their political bent or philosophy or from which they derive their ideas. There are many, many contributors. In fact, they claim, the document itself claims that there were hundreds, literally hundreds of volunteers who put this document together and were from all various walks of life. Essentially, though, if you drill down into those various walks of life, you find a direct connection to the most conservative political ideas that have been expounded on really in this century. So it's clear that what we have is a document that is drafted. Let's back it up farther than that. It's a document that is conceived, developed, drafted, and published and promulgated from a single viewpoint. Hence, the leadership or the name of the document, the subtitle of the document, The Conservative Promise, or a Mandate for Leadership. Now, rather than go down into the very specifics, which, as I pointed out, are covered by broadcast, covered by media, and covered by people that have much, much more staffing and capabilities than we do here at No Hate Radio, I'll say that what I've tried to do now is evaluate if this project becomes the roadmap for a new conservative administration, the way the 1984 document became the roadmap for the Reagan administration, what would America look like? How would we perceive our daily life and existence in America? The way the structure is written, as I've said before, and I don't want to be too redundant about this, the idea is to focus the federal government within the authority of a very powerful executive who essentially rises above the rule of law, who essentially is immune from any type of accountability for his or her actions, and who essentially mirrors the leadership of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, or the North Korean dictator, or others in the world who direct and who are in complete control of their governments. This would extend in this way. The Justice Department, which has now been loudly criticized on the conservative side as being weaponized by the current administration, Actually, under the auspices of Project 2025, the ultimate outcome is that's exactly what would happen. The Justice Department would be weaponized to fit the desires and the purposes of the very powerful executive. The protective agencies, those that were designated to be independent agencies, like the labor organizations and that under the Cabinet Secretary of the Department of Labor, they would essentially be dissolved. There would be no National Labor Relations Act, no National Labor Relations Board. There would be no mandatory overtime. The vision would be that it would bring the powers of capital and the authority of the major controllers of the economic system into the type of control that was exercised by the John D. Rockefellers and that era of industrial giants. And what most people don't continue to remember is that along with this massive capitalistic success came many, many abuses of the workers and the people who did the work for the massive, powerful capitalists of the time. Under a Project 2025, the system would be put into place that would allow that particular imbalance, which currently exists, but would be exacerbated to almost to the return of the early phases of the Industrial Revolution. Personal life, that is, individual ability to control or respond or deal with one's own life would be the vision, if you would like, if you can compare it or if you can find something to understand it in a context that we already know about, would be a view of America in the 1950s, where the entire society, both culturally and economically and politically, is totally dominated by the white male power structure. Women are subjugated and are prevented, actually, from exercising their own authority and their own power and their own decisions, even about something as fundamental as their reproductive rights. These policies would be implemented using every methodology that would be available to this extremely powerful executive and those that work under the extremely powerful executive to oppress, essentially, but at least to enforce this view of how America should look. Independent regulatory agencies would essentially not exist. They would either be, for example, the Environmental Protection Agency would simply be liquidated into a meaningless organization or eliminated entirely. The U.S. Department of Education would be eliminated or in the alternative, reduced to a meaningless organization with no real influence on anything that would happen. The Department of Health and Human Services would be reduced the same way or eliminated. Housing and urban development would be either reduced or eliminated. The Department of the Interior, which includes National Park Service and those things that we all, I think, see as the assets or the property of America as a whole, would be placed under the decision-making, the really unfettered and unaccountable decision-making of this extremely powerful executive that would be hoisted to a great throne as a result of the implementation of Project 2025. The economy, which has already been continually driven toward reducing or eliminating or lowering taxes for the very, very wealthy, which has had the outcome of diminishing any opportunity for people to operate in what we knew in the 1950s as a middle class. The irony is that the implementation of Project 2025 would only make that worse. That is, further tax reductions for the ultra wealthy, more power, more influence, more unfettered, unregulated, Machiavellian, as it were, capitalism. For example, there would be no such thing as labor unions that were effective to engage in collective bargaining. The old phrase that was used decades ago to kind of characterize a very conservative administration was to say what's good for General Motors is good for the USA. And that's the kind of industrial view that would be brought upon by the complete implementation of Project 2025. I think we need to make no mistake about it. Project 2025 is a nostalgic look at a cultural system which mandates that the entire society, culture, and policy and political structure be white male dominated, that women be subjugated, that the separation of church and state be dissolved, and that the church that would be mandated would be the one that resembles most the very, very fundamentalist, right-wing, very strict fundamentalist type of Christian religion would be, if not completely mandated, would certainly enjoy a place of particular privilege in this society as envisioned by 2025. There would be no abortion, there would be no exceptions to the no abortion, and people would, under threat of jail, not be in a position to even treat women with serious health considerations or health concerns in problem pregnancies for fear of prosecution. So Project 2025 is best and most objectively evaluated, I believe, is a radical change in the looks of America. What America looks like today versus what America would look like under a complete implementation of the ideas expounded in Project 2025 would be radically, not just somewhat, but radically different. You would see a social and cultural system that looked like the 1950s. You would see an industrial and capitalistic economic system that looks like the 1920s. You would see a defense posture, an America First posture that would reduce significantly America's role in world and global activities and global policies and global politics, almost as though we can ignore, which I'll disclose I don't believe we can, ignore the globalistic effect of massive amounts of electronic communication and high-speed transportation and economic interdependency throughout the world. This system, this 2025, would have us in a defense posture of America First. And as that would translate out, it would translate out into either reducing or eliminating our role in NATO, It would either reducing or eliminating our role in attempting to broker and encourage peace around the world. It would reduce America's role in its ability to be relied upon by allies. And in my humble opinion, and I don't claim great expertise in this field, certainly anyone who does, I think, is a little bit arrogant today. But I don't think it's out of the realm of reason to predict that such an implementation as contemplated by the full implementation of Project 2025 would have a long-term effect of destabilizing the world. Because America right now, and it's really teetering on the brink, I admit, but America right now stands more or less as a foundational rock against chaos in the world. For example, America has been the number one ally to Ukraine in trying to defend its borders against Russia's aggressive efforts to take that country back into the former Soviet Union. Is there a right or wrong answer in connection with the Israeli-Gaza Hamas conflict now expanding out in the Middle East? Can we do something about that? Can we prevent that destabilization from occurring? Well, my position is if Project 2025 becomes the mantra for America, if it becomes our cornerstone the way the 1984 Heritage Foundation model became the baseline for the Reagan administration, the answer would be that we would simply have no influence on the thousands of year old conflict between Israel and the Hamas and other Palestinian and other ethnicities and individuals in what we call the Middle East. So the fact that we may or may not, individual citizens of goodwill, may or may not agree with the steps taken or the positions taken on one of the most difficult problems in the entire world, and that's the Arab-Israeli conflict over many, many years. I believe that even though the positions are arguable and can be reasonably disagreed by people, where America would utilize this Project 2025 model would be to completely withdraw and allow that conflict to go wherever it's going to go with no influence from any stabilizing force. And I think you've seen that. I think we've all seen that during Saddam Hussein's reign of terror in Iraq. We've seen that and those of us who don't read history this may not be familiar to you, but it is to those of us who are older. When the Khmer Rouge took over, that's Khmer-Rouge, if you're interested in looking. When the Khmer Rouge took over in Cambodia, they literally created a Holocaust that most of the world doesn't know anything about. So when you destabilize the world and you destabilize civilization and you do it on the basis of national isolationism, you do so at significant risk. The America that we would see, if this is fully implemented, would find itself standing alone in a global economy, a global political scene, a global structure that cannot be avoided. You may not want to say America is going to be a part of this global structure, But friends, it's my position that you don't have a choice. This is not how this works. Technology has dictated to us, and it will continue to dictate to us, that all human beings are operating within a sphere of influence that affects us all. The old saying, back before all the latest advantages in technology, was that if America caught a cold, then Japan got the flu. The idea being, it's so interconnected. It is so interconnected. The term that is proper to use with that, and if you don't remember much out of this broadcast, remember this: we are globally, inextricably intertwined. We cannot separate. We cannot. Nationalism in the form being acknowledged or being advocated in the pages of Project 2025 simply disregards the world as it exists today. Okay, you've heard enough from me and No Hate Radio about this thing called Project 2025. Delve into it as much as you want to delve into it, or as little as you want to. Listen to the broadcast news. Listen to the authorities, the people who have studied it and who try to give very scholarly and authentic evaluations of individual paragraphs in it, to the extent you want to. I think the view that I would like to at least sign on to for No Hate Radio is that no, there is no judgment here as to good or bad. There is no judgment here as to, quote, right or wrong, except in this way. The full implementation of Project 2025 would have the intended, actually not mistaken, but the intended effect of isolating America in a global world. To me, and what I would pitch here today, is it's not a matter of right, wrong, good, bad, or any of that. It's a matter of what will work. It's a matter of what will function. Can you really do that today? And let me throw you with one last thought on that, and I promise it will be. America went isolationist in 1918 after World War I. It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. It was the Great War. Woodrow Wilson at the time sought to have America join a thing called the League of Nations, because the idea was, if we can join the League of Nations, maybe we can avoid a thing like the Great War from ever happening again. And he ran headlong into an isolationist Congress at that time that would not even allow America to join the League of Nations, and hence the League of Nations failed. It failed because America was not a part of the League of Nations. So I guess I'll throw it out this way, kind of in down-home terminology. We tried that once, it didn't work. Who's to think that it would work now in an increasingly globalized world? All right, off of that soapbox, on to this. You're the voter. You're America. You're out here. You're called on to make a decision in the fall. I was going to say November, but essentially we've just said various Americans will be making their decision almost from today on till November the 5th, when this is all counted and the ballots are in the box. No question, we've been told that the one campaign will not commit that they'll accept the election results, and we know there will be litigation, and hopefully there won't be another January 6th. But the point being, we will know what the will of the people is by November the 5th. So you who are listening to this are going to be part of the will of the people, and I suggest to you to think about it in terms like this. There is no perfect candidate in any race, because humans are not perfect. and because people don't agree on every issue. Choices, when you get down to the general election, when the primaries are over, when the independent candidates have dropped out or whatever has happened, when you're down to the general election, particularly the presidential election, and most U.S. Senate elections for sure, and U.S. House elections, virtually all elections for governor, it's a binary choice. It's a binary choice. You either accept the notions and ideas of one candidate or another. I submit to you that in order to align oneself with one side of this battle, one side of this game, this football game we call politics in America, in order to align yourself with one side, you need to make the following conscious choices. You need to be able to say that the rule of law, as expounded in the Constitution, is not one of the important factors to you. You need to be able to say that the leader of the country is above the law. You need to be able to say that the guardrails provided by legislation created over the last 100 years is no longer important. You need to say that a nation which does not recognize or respect the ability or the desirability or the necessity to work within a global economy is not important. You need to be able to say that the most important thing is to have a admired, almost worship cult-like leader with full and complete control over the destiny of a country at the top level in America, and that you can trust that that leadership will take the country to a place of prosperity where your current economic concerns will be alleviated, and where the, quote, immigration problem will be solved, and the promises that are made will be carried out. I think in order to align yourself with the other side of the campaign, you need to believe, you need to consider, it needs to be your philosophy that the Constitution and the rule of law is the right way to go, that absolute immunity for any leader leads to dictatorship and that you don't want that. You need to stand for the proposition written out in the Declaration of Independence but not yet ever realized that all persons, it said all men, but all persons are created equal. You need to stand for the proposition that immigrants have built America and that we need to have a system in America whereby people can earn citizenship and they can contribute to the society. You need to be able to recognize, you need to decide that America's position in the global politics and the global economy and the global affairs of the world is an essential cornerstone in maintaining two things: America's ultimate security, but the other thing is to minimize, limit the ongoing chaos that goes on around the world as governments fail and groups attack each other, and wars and rumors of wars just continue to roll and go all the time. You need to be a person who recognizes, or thinks anyway, it needs to be your philosophy if you're going to align with the other side, that there is no good that can come from extreme nationalism or isolationism, and that a travel back to the days of a white male-dominated society that oppresses women and minorities is not a good idea and does not contribute to the welfare of the nation. You need to be a person who believes, as a part of your personal philosophy, that freedom of religion means exactly that, freedom of religion, and that there will not be a state-specified doctrine or liturgy or church that's acceptable, and you still need to believe in order to line up with this other side that I'm talking about, not the isolationist side. You need to believe one more thing, or several more things, but one of them is that, for example, health care, including reproductive rights, is in fact a right and not a privilege. You need to believe that America needs to stand for the inclusivity, the equity, the justice that we claim to in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. You need to be willing to take the position that while we have the right in this country, the constitutional right to bear arms, that there is a reasonable limit, and that limit comes in somewhere along the lines of the pre-existing assault weapons ban that was in effect in this country and later allowed to expire, in that this, do citizens need, should we even want citizens to have military-grade, high-volume, automatic assault weapons and bump stocks? Does that have any sporting or self-defense benefit? And you need to believe that the answer to that is no. So there are multiple things that you need to believe in order to be on that side of the agenda come election day. But I'll say that most of us are never going to agree with either candidate on every single position. For example, if you're a person of Pakistani ethnicity and you live in Michigan, and you may feel like that the current administration or that the candidate on that side of the ticket is not taking a strong enough position to protect the people of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and that you believe that's wrong and you believe supporting Israel at this point is wrong, then I think you have to weigh that. You have to balance that, and you have to say, on the whole, on the overall picture of how I want America to look, is that the controlling factor? Or is the controlling factor the Constitution, the rule of law, the respect for traditions, the things I just listed before? Because you're going to be called upon, friends, to make that call very shortly. Either with your mail-in ballot, your early vote, or on election day, you're going to walk in there and you're going to say, I stand one way or the other. Hence my original statement that I don't think there is room at this point to be undecided. Now, the question that I try to cover in every point is why we're here is elections are obscenely expensive. And we never have been able to get traction on the notion of public funding of elections. So massive private funds, including unaccounted corporate funds now under Citizens United and all, go into these almost Super Bowl contests of political races that have become so outrageously expensive. And the question we should ask as citizens and voters is why? Why are we doing that? Why are we excluding everybody except those who can play in major money from the process of selecting our leaders. And, of course, the question I always love to ask, what are we going to do about it? I say to you, give all that a lot of thought and decide what your personal priorities are. What's the most important thing to you? Because, my friends, you don't get it all. You don't get somebody that's a clone of you. What you get is you get somebody who you say, I respect that person. I believe that person has integrity. I believe that person subscribes to the same notions of America that I do. And when you make that conclusion, go vote. And what you're hearing today is 100% the opinion of No Hate Radio.